And welcome to another edition of Quoth the Raven. This is October 17th, 2019. I'm your host, Louis Bright Raven. And just give me a few seconds here. I'm just checking on some things to make sure everything's working properly. Seem to be okay here. There we go. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. This week's topic is Hollywood versus comics. Who's killing whom? A lot of conversations going on, new things going on in the industry lately. Kevin Feige has been named the new Chief Creative Officer of Marvel, including the publishing division. And that makes for some interesting things. And there's some other stuff going on, talking. So we'll get into that shortly. But first, let's get into our mail questions. Our first question of the night is a return question from KT Wyman. You mentioned Ruby Falls by Ann Nesenti from Dark Horse Burger Books brand. Why should I get that book when she couldn't finish her previous series, The Seeds, from that publisher? Well, KT, I promised you that I would do my best to get in touch with Miss Nesenti or Mr. Aha. David Aha is the artist on The Seeds, and get some information as to what the situation was on that title. And I did get a hold of Annie, and this is what she had to say about the situation. And replied that David was finished with issue number 3, but has needed more time to finish number 4 due to personal family issues. Now, she didn't go into detail of the issues at hand. I don't think she needed to. I don't think that's necessary. I think everybody understands personal health or family issues are what they are. And audiences don't need to know every little thing about that. I followed up that with another question of whether or not issues 3 and 4 of The Seeds were going to be resolicited separately, or if they planned to go to trade directly, or if that had been determined yet. And Anne replied that that hadn't been made up, and that's up to Karen Berger, the editor, and Dark Horse, their publisher. And whenever David finishes number 4. As for Ruby Falls, however, 1 through 4 are all done and in-house, so the series will come out monthly. So if you had concerns about that, any of you, like KT did about Ruby Falls having a delay due to something out of control of the creators, that won't be the case in this particular issue, series. All 4 issues are already in-house, so they should ship on time. So thank you, KT, for your patience on the question. And I appreciate that you waiting. And sorry that took me so long to get in touch with Ms. Nocenti for a response. I hope that by affirming that Ruby Falls is going to come out on time, that you will give the series a chance. Our next question is Ryan S. from San Antonio, Texas. Did you see the photo of the actress who plays Batwoman in her costume making the inappropriate sexual gesture? Don't you think that hurts the character and the comic book? Well, I've seen the photo in question. I don't know if I think it's a non-issue. I don't think it's really an inappropriate sexual gesture. I mean, I guess, but it sounds like someone just pissing in their cornflakes. Ryan, come on. But if people really want to argue about that, I'll show the picture real quick. This is the picture that they're referring to. This is, I believe, the actress with her girlfriend, and you know, okay, yes, all right, whatever. Is it immature? Yeah, I think it's immature. But you know, is it inappropriate? I think that's you know, I've seen worse, a lot worse stuff from actors that, you know, while they're in costume are doing, you know, stupid things. And people do silly things on sets. People do silly things in photo shoots. So, you know, get over it, Ryan. Get over it, people. It's a non-story, really. That's what I would have to say about that. Our next question. For some reason, there we go. Sean M asks, do you think that the changes at Marvel with Kevin Feige taking over as chief creative officer are going to correct the problems that the company is having with their publishing arm? Well, first off, just because he's been named that doesn't mean he's automatically in charge. On paper, yes, he's in charge, but it's probably going to be anywhere from 8 to 18 months before he's really got everything his way, so to speak. Marvel's publishing division is already pretty much booked that far in advance of what they're going to be publishing. Now, I'm not saying that there won't be changes made. There will be, most likely. But in all reality, things are going to stay pretty much status quo. And slowly, as the wheels turn, it will change, but not overnight. So, and to what degree and extent, who's to say? Because Kevin's got a lot of on his plate handling the TV and the film division. And, you know, he might feel like, you know, there's not that much inherently wrong, quote unquote, wrong with the publishing arm. They might feel that there's other stuff going on. It's more of a whatever's the issue between Feige and Perlmutter. And I think it's more of a power play of getting Perlmutter out of the equation of the publishing arm, if there is that much control he has. We'll have to see where that plays out. But I don't think that any of the principal players in the publishing arm at this moment, people like Joe Quesada or CB Cebulski, are going to be immediately affected in how they do what they do for the company at this time. And there we go. For some reason, the screen's having a little bit of delay on switching back and forth, and I apologize for that. Again, that another follow-up was, do I think that CB Cebulski will finally, okay, whatever, be fired now that Kevin Feige is going to be in charge of Marvel Anonymous. Yeah. Again, finally fired. I mean, yes, I'll grant you. There's a lot of people who are angry about CB Cebulski being promoted to his position of power for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the argument that he kind of broke the code, the rules that editors were supposed to be writing comics on the side, and he was doing that under a pseudonym. He was doing the Akira, whatever name for the Marvel manga. And, I don't appreciate him doing that. And I don't, I think, a lot of people have a right to criticize him for it, but is that a fireable offense? If it was, I would think he'd already been fired by now. But, so if there is a situation where Kevin's got an issue with CB, that'll probably get hammered out first, and they'll probably get at least an opportunity to walk the proper path before. I don't think he's just going to be handed his papers and told to leave, because CB's been there for a long time, not just in recent time as editor-in-chief. And he did some other work for Disney prior in correlation with Marvel. So he's pretty much in good standing as far as I can tell. So I don't think that's going to be an issue, at least not in the immediate future. Next question. It's from Paul Mazurik. Hey, Paul. Paul is an old friend of mine from my junior high days, almost 30 years ago. He's an underground independent comics guy. He asks, have you heard about the new Image Comics deal where they're supposedly going to make brands or imprints for various creators who aren't founder members? What do you think of that? Well, Paul, I have read a little article on it on Bleeding Cool. I don't think there's enough information out there right now to really make too many assertions or thoughts of it right now. It depends on who they pick up, what they're doing. There's not enough information for me to really say. There's a lot of creators out there right now who are producing multitude of titles across multiple publishers, particularly writers, and the books aren't selling big numbers. And if it means that Image is going to try and bring them all under Image brand under a house and give them an imprint to better market and brand them, maybe that'll be a benefit. I don't know. It might be just specific people that are already in the Image camp. It might be new people. We just have to wait and see where that takes us. And, it's got potential, but we'll just have to see where it goes. And, try not to rush to judgment too quickly about it. It could have good things, could have bad connotations. We'll just have to wait and see. Our next question. Come on. There we go. I was listening to Indie Volt the other night, and you mentioned the marketing like Time Life Books. Is that really a possibility? That is from C.H. Weidman III. If that is who I think it is, I don't know if that's Charles Weidman or not. Somebody I knew through my APA days. That's the Amateur Press Alliance zine days, fanzine days. Is it possible? Not on a one-by-one basis. You're going to have Time Life Books have a bunch of books, whether it's from one person or a collective of creators, and you're going to have somebody be the fulfillment agency for you, which is what Time Life Books was a fulfillment agency for that type of ad campaign. But if you can get that set up, yes, it's possible. But you're going to have to figure out the cost and expenditures of that. I'm not going to sit down and break all the numbers down for that, because what numbers I used to know are outdated, and I haven't renewed that information. It depends on where you want to market it and who you want to market it to. When I was thinking about it and looking into doing it, we didn't have the internet structure the way we do now. Today, we could do commercializations through YouTube. We could do commercializations through Facebook, Facebook Live. We can do it through Patreon. We can do it through a number of screening platforms that we didn't have back in the early 2000s. So that's, probably a little more cost effective than doing it, trying to get it on a national scale on television. And what networks you want to get onto, and where you're going to place, and what time slot you're going to place. But those are all factors that need to be considered if you're going to go into that dynamic, into that type of marketing stratagem and platform. It's not necessarily, like I said, it's cost prohibitive for one person, I think, self-publisher, but a collective, I could see someone like per-on-demand company like Indie Planet doing it for marketing Indie Planet, indieplanet.com, and saying, hey, we got all these books you can just order, just come online and order which books you want, cancel anytime, whatever. I could see that happening right now. When Peter Simeti, or if Peter Simeti can get his distribution structure built up the way he wants to over at Alterna, and enough people follow and work with Peter on that, I can see it happening there. But you have to have enough content and enough people to do that kind of a platform. Okay. Next question. Been watching the Inktober stuff. Is that the best you can do? Z-Man, Michigan. Now, some people are going to say or think that that's referring to Randy Zimmerman, Z-Man, Zimmerman. That's not how Randy would sign things, and he wouldn't do it like that. He would, first off, he'd call me over on IndieVolt and cut up with me over there. I did track that IP address, and it's some guy from Ohio. And I think I know who it is, and his last name does begin with Z. I'm not going to bother acknowledging his name, but really, is that the best I can do with your sketches, dude? I don't know what you were expecting. It's not something that I'm going to spend 5 or 6 hours on a piece and do something, extravagant. It's just a quick half hour to an hour doodles. Or, well, not doodles, they're a little bit better than doodles, but still, it's not my top level work. It's not meant to be my top level work. Okay. If you don't like it, don't watch. Simple. I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to get under my skin or something. I don't know. Silly, but people are that way sometimes. Next question is from Tammy G, so known as Black Widow 99. Her question is, what current comics are you buying? You seem to do themed reviews, and there are a lot of older books that my retailer just doesn't have and says aren't available to reorder. I just want to find some cool stuff to read. Thanks. Well, thank you, Tammy, for saying hello. The reason she's got Black Widow 99 is she commissioned a Black Widow sketch from me back then. That's how she was trying to remind me of who she was. I actually have been doing reviews of books I've been getting lately. I've recovered, Ruby Falls, and I was covering books like Strayed and Star Pig and Ragnarok and other stuff like that. So I don't really know if your retailer is saying that, I'll grant you, I did some old stuff too, more older stuff as well. But as for what I've been getting, like in the last week or so, last week or two, well, I got Grendel's Odyssey from Dark Horse, #1, 8. It's $3.99. It's by Matt Wagner and his son Brennan as the colorist. I've been getting Ragnarok, The Breaking of Helheim. This is issue #2 by Walter Simonson. And Laura Martin is the colorist, and John Workman letters. And from Scout Comics, Midnight Sky, from James Pruitt and Dave Van Dolman. Or Scott Van Dolman, pardon me. I don't know why I thought it was Dave. I guess because Dave's a friend of mine on Facebook. And Alara Fella. I'm not going to give reviews of them tonight because I just got them and I've been busy with Inktober, so I haven't had a chance to really sit down and read them yet and discuss them. But that's some of the things I've been getting of recent note. There's not going to be a whole lot of reviews tonight because of the fact that I've been doing Inktober. It's been kind of keeping me busy. But we will do a few things in relation to our topic of the night in a few moments. So if you have any other questions, you can email them me at quoththeraven, LBR72 @gmail.com, subject QTR questions. And please indicate whether you want your name and locale read on air. Now, tonight's subject is comics versus Hollywood and who's killing whom, so to speak. And that has to do with a lot of the weird things going on around our entertainment industry these days. For the last few years, we've had several hotshot Hollywood people, Hollywood actors, Hollywood producers, directors, complaining about the success of superhero films. And we've also seen the comic book industry complaining about Hollywooders coming over as writers or producers of comics. That's including actors, that's including big name writer directors coming over to do comic books. It's basically, two groups of cliques just at each other, trying to be who's the cool kid in the lunchroom. Well, this isn't high school, and we need to really start looking at some of the valid points that are brought up by some of these people, and what they're actually talking about, as opposed to having everybody get their butt hurt over someone making a comment. Um, we'll get into some of those comments in just a few moments. Um, but I think one of the more popular um, pieces, comments, was from James Cameron. Uh, most people are very annoyed with James. um, this is something he did recently. This is not the only thing that James has made comments on regarding superhero films, but this is on superhero films in general. He says, quote, "I'm hoping we'll start getting Avenger fatigue here pretty soon. Not that I don't love the movies. It's just, come on, guys. There are other stories to tell besides hyper gonadal males without families doing death-defying things for 2 hours and wrecking cities in the process. It's like, boy." Now, obviously, that's a quote that's taken out of context, but that is the soundbite that everybody's been going after him for. And part of what they're going after him for is because, well, what's the difference between Avengers and, say, Terminator, which has in its sixth movie with Dark Fate coming out soon, or his Avatar series, which is supposed to have multiple series that maybe people did or didn't ask for. So they're kind of like, well, you're being a hypocrite. And they have punished James for this, making this comment, most recently with his comic book manga series related movie, Alita Battle Angel, which came out, I believe, I want to say February or March of this year, if I remember correctly. Very poor box office, unfortunately. And that was basically a direct thumb of the nose by comics fandom and by general media towards him for being critical of Avengers and critical of other things in the superhero genre. Like, well, you're doing this. Why? Well, first off, he's had that particular property since 2000, even trying to get it made. And it's kind of silly to say, okay, well, why is this one different than the other? Well, there is some differences. There's a little more humanitarian character and family uh, thematic structure in Alita Battle Angel that there isn't so much of in some of the Avenger movies. Now, I think James is being a little bit inaccurate in that comment. Obviously, Hawkeye has a family. Obviously, Wanda loses her brother, which is her family in the attack on Sokovia in Age of Ultron. Um, James Rhodes, War Machine is like family to Tony Stark. Um, leading into the Captain America Civil War storyline, it's about family. Bucky is Captain America's family. Winter Soldier, Bucky, whichever one you wish to refer to him as, who killed Tony Stark's parents. That's family. So there is family stuff going on here, James, in that respect. But I also get what he's driving at. A lot of the characterization for these characters is one dimensional, and the stories are very formulaically plot driven. And that's what he's trying to say. Well, can't we do, if we're going to do superhero films, can't we do something with more depth, more meat to it, so to speak? And when you're talking about an ensemble series like the Avengers, that's kind of difficult to do. I think there's so many characters involved um, that you're not necessarily going to see that type of a film. Now, so the other Marvel films, you could say, well, Ant-Man's about family. Paul Rudd is dealing with his ex-wife and his daughter, and trying to be a good father after he gets out of prison. It's about Hank and wanting to try and find his wife, and his daughter Hope is there, and so there is family uh, overtones to these things. Um, I'm not really sure why um, James went there in that particular statement. Um, but also at the same time, like I say, a lot of the storylines are rather straightforward, one-dimensional, predictable in that respect, and maybe that's what he's looking. He wants something more complex, and I think a lot of other people do as well. Um, and not just somebody as successful as him. I mean, people are a little bit annoyed with him because of Titanic and because of the success of Avatar as well. And some people think he's jealous because his box office is being broken by that. Well, I think it's more of a situation of um, there's a lot of really good movies out there that people aren't going to see. Um, Whereas when Titanic was out, when Avatar was out, people were still going to see the other movies that were out there. And it doesn't seem like today's audiences are going to see. They're going to see Avengers 25, 30 times as a family instead of going to see other movies that are maybe not family completely oriented, for kids or something like that, but adults who are going to see. Because after all, a lot of Marvel fans are adults. We're all, arrested adolescents, so to speak, and we're going to see these films, 20, 30 times. Well, do these films really warrant that? And I think there's a fair argument to say no, they're not. And it's not just James making these comments. It's Mark Hamill. And, Mark Hamill's whole career is built on science fiction and superhero characters. What does he say? He says, I quote, "I don't know what's going on with superhero movies. They're fantastic, but I think we're reaching a point of oversaturation." So that's why the story is so important, is that the gimmicks and all that, they can only take you so far. That's what I want, better stories. And I think that that's kind of the whole gist here for most of the guys that are complaining about that topic, is they're saying the stories for the superhero movies, not necessarily comics movies, but superhero movies, aren't necessarily all there. They don't have the depth necessarily, is in their opinion. And part of the reason that they feel that way is because a lot of these superhero movies are based on comic books and their adaptations, and we already know those stories. So there's no shock value. We know what's going to happen before it happens because we've already known the story. Many of us, not everybody, obviously, because everybody reads comics. So for the vast majority of non-fandom that's going to see these movies, it's new to them. That's great. But for fans, and James Cameron is a comics fan, Mark Hamill's a comics fan. Uh, you know, a lot of these people are comics fans that are making these complaints. Um, the reason they're not getting it, quote unquote, is because, well, they already got it. I'm the same way. Um, I almost fell asleep during Infinity War and Endgame because it was just like, yeah, get to the point. I already know the story, so let's move it on, move it on. Too long. Could have easily cut a lot of stuff out of both those films, make them shorter. That doesn't mean they were bad films, but I would have never gone to see them more than once in the theater, partly due to length. And also, um, I wasn't a big fan of the original story. Not that the story was bad, I just not a huge fan of it. So that makes it another issue where I'm not actively engaged with the story. So that means there has to be more. And it can't be more special effects. It can't be more visual um, distraction. There has to be more meat to the story. There has to be more characterization to the story. And that's what Mark is trying to explain. And that's pretty much what James is saying too. at the end of the day. So, there's that. That doesn't mean there isn't any. And I think that's where a lot of the fans are getting hung up on. They're thinking that these guys are saying there isn't any level of it. There is a level of it. It's just not enough. And the reason it's not enough is because over familiarity with what the content is. It's fine for the general consumption of non-fans, but for those who are engaged and know this stuff, it feels hollow. For people who are well trained and well versed in storytelling through film, through television, through comics, it feels to some of them like, okay, we've been there, done that, get on with it. And there's nothing to get on with because they're just retelling what's already been told. One of the big fights I've seen is over the Black Panther movie. And oh my gosh, it's this masterpiece film that really speaks out for Black people, and I just like, really? I don't see it. It wasn't a bad movie in terms of what it's supposed to do, I guess you could say, but I can honestly tell you, I fell asleep in a theater halfway through it. Got woke up by some kids when T'Challa died, and they were crying, "Oh my God, Black Panther dead!" And I said, "Hush, we'll be back in 10 minutes. The Eight Treble Heal." And why was I able to say that? Because I already knew what the story was going to be, because it's adapting pretty much the only really well-known Black Panther story. So it was kind of, I wasn't wowed by special effects. I wasn't wowed by the acting. That doesn't mean the acting wasn't good. I liked all the actors in the film. Thought Michael Jordan did a really nice job as Killmonger. Thought Chadwick Boseman was fine as Black Panther. I actually enjoyed Chadwick better in the other films with the Avengers than I did in Black Panther, simply because the story to me just didn't engage the way it should for me. Now, for others, different experience, obviously. But when people are saying, "Well, why did you didn't deserve an Academy Award?" and people got mad about that, and it wasn't because it was a superhero movie. It was because this notion that this movie was so important for Black people. It's not. I'm sorry, it's not. What's an important Black movie was the one that won the Academy Award for Best Picture the year earlier, Moonlight. Written and directed by a Black director, about gay Black people. First gay, lesbian, transsexual, bisexual, queer movie to ever win an Oscar for Best Picture. Where's the big bugaboo? Where's the big hullabaloo about that movie? There wasn't any, because that movie only got like 60 million in the box office as compared to over 800 million or whatever it was, some ridiculous amount of money. And that's what the elitist, so-called elitists of Hollywood, are bitching at you people about. It's not that you can't go see Black Panther and enjoy it. You don't need to go see it 30 freaking times. You need to go see these other movies too. You've seen it once. Now go see the other good movies that are out there, because you're going to find that you're missing out on stuff. And that's where their anger and resentment towards Marvel and towards these comic movies is coming from, because the audience is choosing to deliberately ignore quality material. And this is something that's very common, placed not only in society, but in the comics fandom as a whole. And that's something we'll get a little bit more to in a moment. And it's not just Mark or James, obviously. But it's our lovely pal from jolly old England, Alan Moore. What are these movies doing other than entertaining us with stories and characters that were meant to entertain the 12-year-old boys of 50 years ago? Are we supposed to somehow embody these characters? That's ridiculous. They're not characters that can possibly exist in the real world. Now, again, it's something that's taken out of context, and Alan's, a lot of people think Alan's a little bit cheeky and a little bit um, grumpy because, they've been remaking all of his comic book movies without his permission, out of his old comics like Watchmen and V for Vendetta and, um, other films like From Hell. Some of them Alan approved and some he didn't. Um, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was another one. A lot of people, again, are thinking he's being a hypocrite. Well, is he? A lot of the stories that are being remade are stories that were done 20 to 50 years ago, originally in comics, and they're being readapted over and over and over again. Not just in live action, but they've already been adapted in cartoon animation, direct to DVD movies. They've been retold in the serialized format in television shows, some of them, whether that's animated or live action. And it's like, hey, you've been told this story. What else you got? And that is the real crux of what a lot of these people are complaining about. And it's not just them. Now, some of them are overly aggressive, I guess you could say. Jodie Foster, she calls it like oil fracking, destroying the environment of cinema. That's a little bit of hyperbole, at least. But it's, again, we have good comic book movies. And, whether it's Martin Scorsese or James Cameron or Jodie Foster or Mark Hamill or Alan Moore or Matthew McConaughey, Christian Bale, guy who just played Batman for the last 3-4 movies. You do an interview with him, he'll tell you he doesn't read comics, doesn't go see the comic movies his kids do. He's not interested. And you're like, well, gee, why'd you play Batman? Well, the reason he played Batman is because it's good money, and his kid probably wanted to see him play Batman. There's something for his kid there. There you go. He did his movies, and now he's done. There's a lot of reasons why actors take roles, and a lot of times, pardon me, it is because their families want to see them take a role. When it comes to these cultural iconic characters, I can see why people will sit there and go, well, the Henry Cavill, Zack Snyder Superman stuff was terrible. And that's not Superman. That's, even people who are fans of those, comic people. Mark Waid had a hissy fit over, that's not Superman. Superman would do that. Well, that's because all the family is taken out of that whole movie. It's not the Chris Reeve Superman where this guy was raised with certain family values and he believes in those core values. And it's not, mom and dad and American apple pie necessarily, but it's a sense of love for fellow humanity and wanting to be human and embracing humanity with the Christopher Reeve version of Superman. So much so that out of love for another human being, Lois, he gives his powers up, becomes human, only to sacrifice his love for that person to regain his powers to stop Zod and Ursa and the other Kryptonian who escaped the Phantom Zone in Superman 2. Human element. Is the human element in the Zack Snyder Superman movie where Superman breaks Zod's neck? I don't know. That's debatable. I think there's a lot of coldness. I think there's a lot of disconnect there. I think it's just there for the visual dynamic rather than the human element. And I think that's what these directors, and I think it's what some of these comic creators are arguing about. Now, conversely, how is this affecting comics? Well, the reality is, people for the last 35, 40 years, we've been very much affected by the licensing situation. And we've been doing licensed comics based off of film and television, whether it's Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Alien, Predator, Star Wars. I think Star Trek, all of them are there. Um, Across multiple platforms, multiple publishers throughout the decades as licenses expired. And those are niche audience books, by and large. Some of them are larger niches than others, but they're niche audience. They're not something that you can necessarily market to mass audience. Even though there's billions of people who went to see the Star Wars movies, it doesn't translate to buying billions and billions of comics every month. Um, it takes a certain dedication, certain dedicated love to that construct, that concept, to go out week after week, month after month, year after year to follow that story. Uh, Whether it's for comics, whether it's for the novels, what have you. And then, well, what happened? Disney bought the rights from Lucasfilm, and they threw out the entire expanded universe, and now they're rebuilding the whole canon, what's history and everything. And you feel like you've been cheated because all this time you spent invested in buying these books over the years. You feel like, well, I now you wasted all that time. It's not doesn't count. It's like you're slapping me in the face as a fan. And I've seen a lot of people do that, and they're angry, at the new Disney Marvel movies or Star Wars movies, whether it's Rogue One, whether it's the stuff with Rey and Kylo and Death of Han and all that stuff. But go back to when Dark Horse first got the license under Mike Richardson, and it was Cam Kennedy, and it was Heir to the Empire, and um, Luke was being possessed by the dark side by a returning emperor who had cloned himself. Um, a lot of people didn't like that either back then. It just wasn't as well known because it wasn't out there as grandiosely as the films. They were mad because they'd already spent 100 plus issues in buying Marvel's version of Star Wars, which was canon but not canon ever. Parts of it were and parts of it weren't. Yeah, it depends on who you asked. There's a lot of stuff in the Marvel Star Wars that George Lucas did not remotely like, and would like to have just like thrown it out with bathwater. But it was there, and so now that you built that one, and you start building the books um, with I don't even remember the names of the characters anymore, but uh, the crazy Jedi guy that Luke finds, um, and then of course Han and Leia's kids and their adventures, and the death of Chewbacca and other things that go on in the expanded universe. Um, they're just different generations of the same thing, and just because something comes to a closure, you don't need to get mad about it and say, well, I'm going to reject now the new version of it. But we do. And why do we do that? Because everything's supposed to come to a closure, folks. Everything's supposed to have an ending so that we can relax, take a breath, experience it, and then move on to the next thing. It's like life. Um, these characters aren't meant to stay with us forever. Um, just like our friends come and go in our lives, family members come and go in our lives. Um, to want this never ending saga is unnatural. It is inexplicably difficult to justify, in my opinion, to do that. And yet we fight that. And we fight very ferociously and with very little respect for one another on the internet over this on practically a daily basis. Yeah. And we criticize each other for supporting whatever. I'll give you a perfectly good example. Ridley Scott's another guy that's one of those guys that has sort of an elitist idea, but okay, what's going on? Well, Blade Runner 2019? Yeah, 2019. All right. Well, what's that based on? Well, that's based on his movies, which are based on a book from Philip K. Dick called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which, by the way, was adapted as Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I believe it was by Boom. Might have been by IDW a couple of years ago. We've also seen these adapted in film again and again. And the question is, do you get tired of seeing the same thing over and over? And if you do, what are you going to do about it? And that's where we're at in this problem, not just in film and television, but also in comics. Both these mediums, these entertainment mediums, are being repetitive of each other and repetitive of themselves. Yes, it's kind of cool when you're my age. I'm 47. I guess it's cool to see Crisis on Infinite Earths being played out on the CW. Oh my gosh, actually, no, it's not. My friends that are loving it, all the power to you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. This total disconnect for me. Part of it was I never got into the solo books or solo TV shows enough to care about the characters. And part of it is I already know the story of Crisis of Infinite Earths, and I don't really care how they adapt it. I'm sure there'll be some cool stuff in it, and maybe someday I'll watch it when it's out on DVD or something. But it's not must see TV to me, the way it is for many of my friends. But I'm not going to sit there and tell you you're wrong to feel that way. I'm not going to tell you that it's you're a sucker to get into it. But when I say that I'm not interested in it, and I see other people saying they're not interested in it, and we're comic fans, people look at us strangely, like, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with us. It's that we've already seen this story. We already know the story, and we don't need it again. We're looking for something else now. We've moved on. We don't need to recapture that element from our childhood. We're not looking for nostalgia kick. We're not looking for the way things used to be when I loved comics. We're looking for what's there that's new that gives me the same feeling I had when I loved comics. Those are two separate things, folks. And that's what we're looking for. And we're not finding it because both the comics and our film and television keep repeating the same content. And I know I keep saying the same thing over and over myself throughout this monologue, I guess you could say. But that's what it keeps coming back to, unfortunately. Let's see if we can find. Unfortunately, some of the other things that I had planned on posting for this show did not get made due to time constraints. It has kind of truncated the episode this week. But we'll go back a little bit. And we'll show some of the things that were here. Again, it's not just Blade Runner. Island of Dr. Moreau from IDW. It's pretty art. Um, I like the artwork by Gabriel Rodriguez. But this is a story that, of course, has been around for. I forget how old the story is. Probably about 100 years now. Of course, I know the story already. Why'd you get it then? Well, I was interested in Gabriel's artwork more than anything else. I like his work on a creator-owned series he does called Sword of Ages, also from IDW. And I just, kind of followed Gabriel over because I wanted to look at his art. He's pretty. But there's other things out there, like I said, I already showed you the Blade Runner stuff. People ask me, well, don't you read the Star Trek comics? Because there's friends of mine who write the Star Trek comics. I can't get into them. I tried. It's that kind of a situation a lot of times. People go, well, aren't you going to watch Picard? Someday, maybe. I don't need to buy CBS All Access to get it. What about Star Trek Discovery? Saw the first season. Haven't seen the second. It's the same thing with all these other things. Disney Plus is showing you all these Star Wars shows and Marvel shows, and wow, we're all going to be bedazzled by all the cool new stuff. Only it's not new. It's just expansion of what's already been done. Some of it's going to be cool, and some of it's going to be very enjoyable, I'm sure. But is it worth my going and spending more money to get that when I'd rather have something else? And I'm going to go look for something else. That's the difference. And that's, I guess I'm the audience that these so-called elitists are looking for. And yeah, there's movies I want to go see, but other people don't because they want to go see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 for the third time, or they want to go see, Captain Marvel for the sixth time. Or when I say Captain Marvel, I mean the Marvel one, not Shazam. Not that Shazam was a bad movie either. I just wasn't particularly interested in that one myself. Wasn't all interested in seeing the Brie Larson movie, but other people were, so we went and saw it. It was okay. The Flurkin was cute. Not really keen on that being the reason why Nick Fury lost his eye, but okay, whatever. That's what these things are, though. It's just, to me, it's just turn your brain off. You go, you watch it. Okay, that was fine. Battle Angel Alita storyline, it's not any better than the Marvel stuff. It's got plenty of plot holes in it. A lot of stuff wrong with the film story wise, partly because they were adapting a much larger construct than what can be filmed in that span of time. To be honest with you, a lot of stuff that was derivative. I mean, obviously the rollerball death race scenes kind of thing going on there, and some other stuff in there that's obviously derived from other things from before. What got me with Alita, though, was the world building and the visual design was very captivating to my inner child, and I think that's probably because it was something new to me. I remember reading Alita as the manga as a kid, teenager, but I didn't really remember the storyline. when I saw it. So I was like, okay, we'll try it, you know. And I just happen to like the visual design of it, but I'm not going to tell you it's a breathtaking movie, better movie than Avengers or anything. No. We're not going to talk about that. That's nonsense. It's just no different than the rest of the superhero movies in that respect. The only difference is the visual design was enough to engage me, whereas some of the other stuff, possibly like Avengers, it's not as engaging because, well, we've already seen the costumes, we've already seen all the special effects that we're going to see. You know, there's only so many ways that Captain America can throw a shield, only so many ways that Thor's going to shoot lightning out of his hammer, or Hulk's going to rip stuff up. You know, you know, so much, you know, not that much left there, and so it's interesting because at least Marvel had enough common sense, seemingly, to bring a closure with the end game storyline, and presumably Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and others are not coming back to the roles that they were playing, and we're going to move on from those characters, and I hope we do. But I know that by doing so, there's going to be a lot of fans. Oh, you got rid of them, and now you're going to bring in these other crappy Marvel characters, the second generation. I don't like them. I don't like America Chavez. I don't like X-23. I don't like this character or that character. Then I guess you're done, aren't you? Don't need to go see those movies. Yeah, it's just like the comics. You don't like those comics that are out there now, you don't have to buy them. We all have our little. It's just like the Star Wars stuff I was talking about earlier. There's the Star Wars era, the Dark Horse and Expanded EU era, and now there's the Disney era. There are three different eras. You can enjoy all three, or you can pick whichever you like. You know, and if the part that you liked is over with, well, then okay, it's over with. Move on with your life. You know, things come to an end. And you know, it's the same thing with Hellboy. Um, the new film, David Harbour, the reboot film, I guess you want to call it. Um, People loathed it because wasn't Ron Perlman, wasn't Guillermo del Toro's story, wasn't. We didn't get to see the end of what happens when Liz has Hellboy's kids. That's what you wanted. You didn't get it. You're angry. Okay. Throw your little temper tantrum. Well, don't you want to see that? I did, but if there's a reason they can't make it, and there's several reasons why they couldn't, one of which being Selma Blair's health, another being financial and scheduling issues for Del Toro, and people want to go make something else with it and move on. Who am I to tell Mike Mignola he can't do that? It's his character. You know, I don't have to go see it in the movie theater. But for all the bitching and complaining about how much it sucked, okay, I got the movie on DVD. I watched it. Not nearly as bad as people made it out to be. Not a masterpiece of cinema by any means, but I'll tell you right now, moreover than not, it's the fact that I'm indulged in 25 plus years of Hellboy comics, books, animated series films, live action films. I'm just burned out on Hellboy, you know, rather than, well, that movie sucks. I'm just burned out on it. And I realized that even before the movie came out, and I've recently stopped buying all that Mignolaverse stuff. Does that mean Mike Mignola sucks? No. Does that mean that you guys should stop buying it if you still enjoy it? No. But for me, my journey with those characters are done. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'll tell you what is something wrong. If you're still buying it and then bitching about it and telling, oh, this stuff sucks, this stuff sucks, this stuff sucks, something's wrong with you. You got to stop that. And that's what we keep doing. You want to fix comics? Hollywooders coming over. Joss Whedon's doing comics. Joss Whedon's making comic book movies. So, actors and actresses coming over to make comics. Jennifer Love Hewitt did a comic book based on her TV show. Okay. Rosario Dawson did a comic book. Okay. Gerard Way's doing comics. Okay. It is what it is. You have the right to choose not to buy. But if you make that choice not to buy, tell me what you are buying. Mm-hmm. If you're buying something, tell me why you're buying it. You know, but in closing, are these elitists correct? Is the superhero genre of film killing cinema? The films aren't killing cinema. What's killing cinema is a lack of cultural diversity within our audience base. We keep going back to the comfort food. We keep going back to the candy bar instead of going and getting the steak. Go buy a steak. Go chew on something. Go challenge your mind. Go watch a movie like If Beale Street Could Talk or Moonlight or Us. If you want to celebrate black cinema. If you want to celebrate queer cinema. Instead of complaining about the latest gimmick, storyline, crossover events, whether it's Nazi Cap or Batman and Catwoman did or did not get married, or Kitty Pryde and Colossus did or didn't get married, which led to another marriage or didn't or whatever. If it's, you know, the whole thing of X-Men's being rebuilt because Moira McTaggart has a million lives that she relives over and over because that's her mutant power or whatever. You're going to get stories to view, and you get to pick and choose which ones you want to read and which ones you enjoy or not enjoy. Are you a fool to buy something that you don't enjoy? In my opinion, yes. Mm-hmm. But I'll let you defend your choice of buying something if you really enjoy it. But the people who continue to buy and refuse to explore what else is out there, just out of road habit, that's who's really killing comics. That's who's really killing cinema. Okay? Mm-hmm. So that's all for now. Like I said, it's a little bit shortened episode this week because of the Inktober stuff and a lot of medical appointments this week for my father and myself. Hopefully, we don't have any more for the rest of the month. So hopefully next week I can give you a little more reviews, and we'll talk about some of the books that I showed today, and we'll talk about some other stuff as well. There's plenty of books I haven't shown you guys out there. And if you have any other questions, you can reach me, Lewis Bright Raven at Quoth the Raven LBR72 at gmail.com. And I think I will bid you adieu. If this computer will let me. It's being fussy tonight. So until next week, stay safe.